You Gotta Be the book doesn't lend itself to a read the chapter, post a response format. So let's take a look at this book as a whole. When we're first introduced to Jeffrey Wilhelm in the pages of his book, we see a confident young teacher who feels like he's on top of his game. As the introduction progresses, however, we see the evolution of a more mature Wilhelm as he comes to the realization that he may have been letting his students down throughout the years. He's blindsided by students' reactions to reading and to his questions about how students read and for what purpose. He has to stop and ask himself, why do readers struggle? What is it that we miss as teachers that allows students to get to the place where they absolutely hate reading? And more importantly, what if it were otherwise? Wilhelm observes his own daughter and a little neighbor boy racing to get to sit in his lap and have him read to them. He later learns that this little neighbor boy is having a tough time at school with reading and doesn't like to read at school at all. The dichotomy between the boy's delight in hearing a story read to him at home and the struggle he's having at school caused Wilhelm to stop and seriously consider what might be the differences for students between reading at home for sheer pleasure and reading at school because it's required. What happens between that early love and enjoyment of books in early childhood to the abject refusal to read in adolescence? One student of Wilhelm's referred to reading as a literary snipe hunt. That is, only reading enough to find the answers to the questions at the end of the chapter or the book. Student comments such as this led Wilhelm into his research on engaging reluctant readers and, in turn, teaching them to learn to engage with their own reading. According to Wilhelm, the solution to engaging students in reading and helping them to develop an enjoyment of reading, literacy instruction must move toward a reader-centered classroom. By focusing our instruction and support on the construction of meaning, the classroom can become a place where students not only produce and share meanings, but a place where they share ways of reading and being with text, becoming aware in the process of their own strategies and those of others. Wilhelm advocates the interactive model of reading. This model of reading allows readers to pursue their own reading and construct their own meaning, yet asks adults to teach background knowledge, skills, and strategies helpful to the reader's purpose in the context of real, personally purposeful reading and writing. Rosenblatt draws a distinction between two different kinds of reading, efferent reading and aesthetic reading. Efferent reading is pursued when readers adopt a stance in which they are concerned with what information they can take away from the reading. The text is treated as consisting of information. Aesthetic reading is maintained for the purpose of living through an experience that is enjoyed while reading. Wilhelm also does away with any traditional idea of a literary canon. What constitutes a literary text is any text that provides a particular reader with a deeply engaging aesthetic experience. This clears the path for the introduction of young adult literature that makes sense to the students into the literature curriculum. We must remember that the way in which we mediate literature with students will have a profound effect on the kinds of readers they will become. After months of careful thought and contemplation, Wilhelm decides to launch a year-long research project with his students as co-authors of the study to learn how to better engage his students in the reading process and to get them to engage with the text. The purpose of the project: how could the students and Wilhelm create a learning climate that would be meaningful for all of them, one that emphasized their current readerly activities and human concerns? How could we run a class that helped to encourage vital and enriching reading experiences by building on what individuals already knew and could do, and that extended and developed them as readers from whatever starting point they now inhabited? His study students used a wide variety of moves to engage with stories, to become active participants in the story world as real readers, and to reflect upon their experiences as readers. Now let's take a look at the data analysis from Wilhelm's research. He identified 10 different dimensions of response that his students used as they created, experienced, and responded to literary worlds, which he broke into 3 categories: evocative dimensions, connective dimensions, and reflective dimensions. You can find the full description of Wilhelm's reading dimensions in the text. Students in Wilhelm's study were taught to engage in the stories they were reading by creating themselves as characters of a book through readers' theater experiences. Students were also given opportunities to creatively express their reactions to stories through drawing and painting. Wilhelm describes these ideas fully and gives how-tos in the appendices of his book. I encourage you to discover those ideas presented in the later chapters of the book, in addition to what I've presented here, and comment on them as you come across something you find interesting, challenging, or if you have a question.